So our next presenter is actually in the States at the moment, but I really wanted him to do a presentation today. And so our next presenter is Dr. David Tuffley, and he's a senior lecturer in applied ethics and cybersecurity at Griffith University's School of ICT and is an internationally recognised thought leader on the social impacts of technology. His diverse expertise spans software engineering, cybersecurity, ethics, futurism, and communication. So David's research and writings on how emerging technologies like AI and how it transforms employment society have reached over 2.5 million readers globally. He's a regular contributor to mainstream media, a sought-after speaker, and an educator guiding the next generation of technologists and leaders. His professional accomplishments range from publishing more than 80 non-fiction books and is sought after as a tech-splainer. So he's really good at taking things that are quite complicated and helping people like myself better understand them. And he does this internationally, nationally on radio and TV. He regularly visits Berlin and Silicon Valley to study mechanisms of global innovation. He has decades of experience across academia, research, industry, and government. And so he's really well positioned today to present on ethics of forensic mental health technology.
Thank you to the Master of Ceremonies, and welcome to my presentation on the my exploration of the digital frontier and the ethics that pertain to it. The purpose of this presentation is really to engage mental health professionals and allied fields in a meaningful discussion about the ethical issues around technology in the forensic mental health area. Hopefully, this will be a foundation for solving at least some of the implementation challenges that currently exist. So, as I say, the presentation is really about exploring the ethical questions that come up when using technology in forensic mental health. We'll take a good look at how technology can help, but also the important things that we need to think about in order to make sure that this technology is used fairly and safely, or ethically. Let's start by understanding what we mean by forensic mental health. Well, it's about using mental health knowledge and skills to help with legal matters like court cases. Technology can play a big role in this, from helping people to get mental health care to monitoring their progress. Then in the later part of the presentation, we'll go through the different ways that technology can be used in forensic mental health. We'll take a look at the online therapy options, virtual reality, wearable devices. These are all tools that can offer new ways, very effective ways to help people, but they also bring up new questions and certain ethical issues. Then we'll discuss the good things that technology can do. For example, it can make mental health care more accessible and even help us track people's progress more closely. But it's important to remember that technology is not perfect. There are risks. There are always risks like privacy concerns and the possibility of things going wrong. Throughout, we'll take a fairly deep dive into the ethical issues that need to be addressed, and we'll talk about things like privacy, consent, and fairness. We'll also have a look at how technology can affect people's relationships and their rights. By the end, we hope you'll have a better understanding of the ethical implications of technology in the forensic mental health area. So at this point, let me now display my PowerPoint and we can get into the presentation proper. Here it comes. Just give that a second to load. Here we are. I should have introduced myself. My name is David Tuffley. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of ICT at Griffith University. My area of particular interest is in the social impact of technology, and in particular, how artificial intelligence is going to change the way that we do our work in the future. As I mentioned, this is aimed squarely at people in the health field generally, to sort of stimulate some sort of discussion about the ethical implications of technology. That is what we're here to discuss. Our objective is to explore the ethical issues associated with the use of technology in forensic mental health and discuss strategies for addressing these. So, overview of technology in this field. So, it's not really telling you anything you don't already know, that technology is really quite radically changing the way we do things in forensic mental health. There are a few main types of technology that we're using. First is e-health. This is things like online therapy, video conferencing, mobile apps on the phone. It makes it a lot easier for people to get mental health care, particularly if they live some distance from where these services are, or if they have trouble leaving their homes. Virtual reality, that's a very promising technology that can create realistic situations for people to have therapeutic practice in. So, for example, someone who has anger management issues might practice dealing with stressful situations in a virtual world where the consequences are harmless. Then there's wearable devices like smartwatches, fitness trackers like Fitbit, or even the Aura Ring, which is a new generation wearable device. All of these things, though, can collect a lot of useful information about a person's health, biometric information of all sorts of things, heart rate, breaths per minute, you name it. There's a lot of very detailed information, and that information can be quite helpful to doctors and therapists who can use that info to monitor people's progress and perhaps make better decisions about their care. These technologies can be used in lots of different ways, like helping people understand that offences that they may have committed might help them get a better understanding of what was actually going on there. They can assess their own mental state. It can offer treatment options, and it can help them to manage their behaviour and to even monitor their progress. So there's a lot of really quite useful things that the technology does make possible, and that's just a few of them. That's not an exhaustive list. So there are these positive impacts. It can have a very big positive impact on forensic mental health. Some of the benefits are things like, well, as I mentioned, the e-health side of things, the mobile apps. Telehealth is a very useful thing these days. It got going during the pandemic when people were unable to attend to their doctor in person. Telehealth went from being something a bit awkward, a bit difficult to do, to something that is almost preferable these days for people, particularly if it's done in a bulk build sort of a scenario. Very helpful for people who can't get out or people who are living in remote areas. So then there's the enhanced monitoring side of things. The wearable devices, for example, a fitness tracker is a very useful thing that can monitor over time a person's the cycles of health that person goes through. A lot can be determined from this. Myself personally, I have a Fitbit which I look at and use very carefully every day, and it has undoubtedly helped me to live a more healthy lifestyle. So, there is that. They're also very efficient. It can streamline processes in mental health care, such as scheduling appointments, managing records, communicating with other health professionals. So these are some of the positive benefits. But of course, with every good thing, there are potential problems, and certainly this is the case with technology in healthcare, particularly in mental health care. Principal among them would be privacy and the security of private user data. There is that risk of data breaches, and that could lead to quite sensitive health information being leaked, being used, being sold in some form or another. There's also questions about who actually owns and controls the data collected through the technology. In a related example, social media like Facebook, if you don't pay for the service, then it's because the Facebook or Meta actually owns all of the data that you generate by using your social media account, and that the business model is that they use that data to direct advertising to the person. So it might seem like your data belongs to you, but for sure it will say in the terms and conditions that no, it doesn't. It belongs to, in this case, Meta. The same would be true too of at least some instances of technology being used in the health sector. Then there is the issue of informed consent. It can really be very difficult to make sure that people do in fact give their informed consent. That's because currently, in legal terms, if a person clicks on a checkbox which says, "I give my consent," then that takes care of the legal requirement to get informed consent. Now, almost certainly that person has not clicked through to the 5,000 word legal document that sits behind that screen, and which basically says any number of different things that people almost never read. So they might give their consent, but it's not informed consent, even though legally it is said to be informed. I think what would solve that problem is on that page with the consent checkbox, if a short bullet list in plain English were to list out the ways that people will be affected by the use of this product or service, then people could make an informed decision. What about the effectiveness of it and the safety of it? So technology can be used in any number of ways, but we must make sure that it is used safely and efficiently, or in ways that benefit people. And that means it should be based on evidence and should not cause harm. There should be no harm caused to the user. And as I was just saying, the user does need to be properly informed about what will actually happen when they use it. It can certainly reduce the amount of face-to-face contact. Now, it's obviously often a good thing to have face-to-face contact. I think this is one reason why health professionals won't be replaced by artificial intelligence anytime soon, because when it comes to health, you really want to be dealing with another human being, someone with empathy that you can talk to about these things. Just simply talking to an AI might seem a bit sterile to some people. So that is one of the potential downsides of using technology in mental health. It's the reduction of face-to-face contact. And while this online therapy option and other forms of e-health can be pretty convenient, they may not be providing the same level of personal connection and interaction and empathy as traditional in-person therapy sessions. And this could have, probably will have, an impact on the quality of care, as face-to-face interactions can be important. So the challenge here would be to find an optimal way of using telehealth options. Now, a related example I could give you was back in the 80s and around then, telecommuting became the thing to do. So people started working from home and dialing into their workplace. This got going in California because it was seen to be a disaster recovery strategy. California, as you probably know, is subject to earthquakes. And if a big earthquake occurred, telecommuting would allow things to keep moving along. Now, what people found was that if they spend more than 2 or 3 days a week telecommuting, they drop out of the loop of their workplace, the flow of activity and conversations that go on in the workplace. So, 100% tele anything is suboptimal. People still need face-to-face, the human touch. There is also the possibility that inequalities may be made worse. Not everybody has equal access to these technologies. It is becoming cheaper. This is quite true, very much becoming cheaper. But unless it becomes very cheap, then, it is going to be out of the reach of some people. So, the digital divide, well, people in rural or remote areas, as well as those with limited technology skills, might have problems accessing the technology-based mental health care. That's not going to always be a problem, because one trend we have observed with technology generally is that it becomes cheaper and easier to use as time goes by. So if you just think about the smartphone that's in your pocket or on the desk in front of you, all of the apps that are on there, many of them are digitized versions of physical products that only a few, decade or two ago could only be accessed via a physical device. So Google Maps or your navigation map, you'd buy a separate Navman, device. Your camera, a video camera, 4K, high definition, it's all on the camera. 10, 15, 20 years ago, you would pay thousands of dollars for a video camera. And there are literally dozens of apps on people's phones now that have digitized and reduced the cost of down to almost nothing to use. And so that gives us hope that these access issues might be solved in the not too distant future. Equity concerns, likewise, it's important to make sure that everybody, including marginalized groups, get the benefit from these technology advancements. Next point, persuasiveness and mental integrity, an interesting one. So technology can be very persuasive, and it can have an impact on a person's mental integrity. There is an old saying that many of you will be familiar with, is that we humans are the sum total of the 3 or 4 or 5 people that we spend the most time with. We become like them because humans are social, and we naturally just adopt the habits and thought patterns of the people that we spend the most amount of time with. Now, that's people we spend time with, but if people are spending a lot of time with technology and the technology does things a certain way, well, that is going to have its impact on people's mental health, well, on their health generally, their mental health. So it's not necessarily saying it's a bad thing. It is if it is overdone. It is if people are isolated and all they do is interact with technology and never with people, then they can find themselves in an echo chamber, so to speak. So generally speaking, though, technology can be designed to manipulate or influence people's thoughts and their behaviors. That's what social media does. That's what TikTok does. That's what Instagram does. It's kind of an experiment that has been conducted for the last 20 years and really the impact on the younger generations, on pre-teens and teens, has been really quite profound. There is going to be some sort of impact then on people's mental autonomy, so to speak. The excessive use of technology can lead to a loss of autonomy in the way people think. Do people now think for themselves, or are they dependent upon that technology to tell them how to think, or at least to provide them with a structure within which to think? People can get overly reliant on technology, and it can be hard for them to make decisions without the technology to help them solve problems. And that can certainly have a negative impact on their mental health. So, getting on to some specific forensic considerations. So let's, there are several of these which we see here. We do need to give some thought to these when using technology in the forensic mental health field. So firstly, legal frameworks. Forensic mental health professionals have the challenge of sort of navigating the legal framework that governs the use of technology, as well as the laws that relate to patient rights, to confidentiality and treatment obligations. This is a difficult balancing act to get right, but it is a solvable problem. It's not a wicked problem. It is something that can be thought through, and a model of behaviour can be developed. The second point being autonomy and rights. So it is important to balance those legal obligations of professionals with the ethical considerations of respecting patient autonomy and their rights. This is really just an extension of the point we were just making. However, that can be quite challenging when the technology is used ongoing to monitor or even control patient behaviour. So that's where it becomes particularly problematic. So how do we go about addressing these ethical challenges? Well, there's a few ways that we could think of to do this. It's important, I think, to involve everyone concerned, all stakeholders. I mean, as a general principle, when you're trying to solve problems that involve multiple stakeholders, that is one of the interesting challenges that people face, is involving all of the stakeholders that need to be brought in. And that doesn't just include the obvious ones of the mental health professionals, but also legal experts, technology specialists, and of course the patients and the patient's family under some circumstances. All of those are really essential to get a well-rounded, robust sort of set of standards or framework for ethical practice. So that would be the first thing, stakeholder involvement. Second thing too would be to then, once you have involved the stakeholders and done the necessary requirements understanding, then a framework can then be developed, and guidelines and can be developed. Guidelines and regulations need to be developed. That's right. Interesting point to make about this is, a good example is in the software development field. So it's relevant to this because with software development, one of the big problems is not understanding the full range of requirements that the proposed system will be able to afford, not to include everybody into the development of the product. And this applies very much to the sorts of overcoming the ethical challenges that we've been talking about here. So it takes longer than a lot of people realize to actually understand properly what is required. That is my major point. In the software field, often requirements are glossed over and the full set of requirements are not developed. And if a system is developed based on an incomplete set of requirements, then it is suboptimal. I've seen users say, well, that's all very well, but it doesn't really do what we want it to do. It would be the same when seeking to develop ways of overcoming these ethical challenges. So my point really is that it is going to be quite time-consuming and painstaking work. But once that work is done, then a regulatory framework or some kind of guide to action will be possible to develop. Okay, so that's developing the framework. Then how do we then implement the framework? So what are some strategies for that? So the first one listed there is obviously training and support. This would be the obvious thing to say. Healthcare providers do need to be properly trained how to use these new technologies, not left to do it in a haphazard way, in a trial and error sort of a way, but to be given a good, solid introduction and practice with it under supervision in a training environment. That's really important. So that's part of the training. And then the ongoing support, that's probably going to be something like a helpline or some sort of question and answer site or something like that. There are quite a number of ways that you can provide support. Yeah, people need to have access, not just to the initial training, but to the ongoing support and resources. Secondly, the investment in infrastructure. So having put in that amount of effort to then starve a promising solution through insufficient funding on infrastructure is obviously counterproductive and, you know, a waste of time and effort that's already been put in. So adequate resources do need to be put into the infrastructure, such as reliable internet connections, the implementation of technology-based mental health services. So that is our little tour of the pros and cons and challenges, ethical challenges, involved in using technology, including artificial intelligence, in a mental health or a forensic mental health context. It offers really great opportunities, benefits, but also challenges in this field. And you know, people often point to the downside of technology and say that they actually make too much of the downside and not enough of the upside. When you think about it, going back hundreds of thousands of years, humans have always been good at developing technology to solve the sorts of problems, the tools to help them just get along in life. And some of these tools are dangerous. I mean, fire was terribly dangerous. It could burn down the village, but it was very useful for cooking food and keeping warm and doing all sorts of things. We learned how to use it safely. And so any technology can be, the risk of that technology can be minimized. So here's an ethical principle to remember, that if a technology offers significant benefits as well as certain risks, then if the benefits outweigh the risks, then a way must be found to use that technology to maximize its benefit whilst devising strategies to minimize the risk. So that's really what I would like to finish up by saying. It's really important to continue the dialogue. So let me now go back to the camera and I will just say a few final words. I do thank you for your attention. I am attending a conference elsewhere at the moment, but I really would have loved to have been here with you in person. Hopefully it's given you a deeper understanding of the ethical implications of technology in the forensic health field. So let us now continue this important conversation and work together perhaps to ensure that technology is used responsibly. Thank you very much and all the best.
Right, so we sort of had the morning where we saw a balance, where we spoke about some of the risks associated with technology, with the client group and the people that we work with. And then we're starting to touch on maybe some of the benefits and what we need to consider in using technology with the people we work with. And in the way that this morning we heard about a new expression of old offences, so in a new way, we're also seeing the same principles apply to use of technology in treatment and management, in that we need to have informed consent, it needs to be safely used, it needs to be effective. So what I'll do is that I'll invite Grant and Andrew up to answer any questions from the room, and then Amanda's going to monitor the questions and answers online for us, and we'll go to them second. Well, just for in the room, we'll wait till Deb comes to you with the microphone so we can catch you online as well. So does anyone have any questions for either Andrew or Grant? Or go, I'll let Deb choose.
I'm coming here because I didn't see the other one.
I'm just Niall Higgins. Thanks very much for your presentation. I'm working in mental health as well, in nursing. I was just wondering, with your victim support strategies, do you use technology at all to help the victim to detect early signs of warning signs of something that may reoccur?
Oh no, sorry, I'll tell you. No, we don't in the technology field around being able to identify things. There's a myriad of apps, there's a myriad of different devices out there that will significantly contribute to a breakdown in mental health, in my opinion. So what we usually see is a victim survivor will download an app on a phone that can identify hidden cameras. They go and have a look around their room and everything's a hidden camera. So, you know, that causes major problems, and then you see significant issue around sort of paranoia and all sorts of different things. So I don't recommend anything like that. From a personal safety perspective, I mean, we also use technology that can discreetly alert police and emergency services that something is occurring at the time. So, yeah, we provide that. We designed and we built that software that can be used in wearables and all sorts of different things. So technology 100% is there to maintain safety as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Hi, Grant. I wanted to say your presentation was really amazing. I work for DV Connect, and you made some really, really valuable points there about follow-on questions being needed rather than just ticking the boxes. You refer in criteria. Love to have a chat with you about that, because this is one of the main sticking points for us, is finding somebody that can do these sweeps for our women. There's not many out there that do it and will travel to where our women are. So we'd really love to connect in with you and the reader program around that. And I really like the way you connected the sexual violence with the technology and the coercion, and that is really highly linked to non-fatal strangulation as well, which is another big risk factor. And the safety planning before you take the tracking devices out, that was just amazing, because a lot of people don't take that into consideration. It's just like, oh my God, we've got to get rid of it, got to get Nate. It's the forward thinking that needs to be done. And yes, would really love to take some of your time up later if you've got some, or if you want to connect with DV Connect, because we could really benefit, and so could our clients from what you're doing. So thank you.
Thanks, appreciate it. It's kind words. You're certainly pumping the tyres up there. Yeah, look, we've been working in this space for 10 years. You know, we look after a lot of the refuges, and you know, we always try and ensure that when, you know, your clients go into those safe accommodation, whether it be a hotel, whether it be a longer term accommodation, that we ensure that they go there safely, because it not only affects their you know, at the time their feelings of being safe, but it also affects their long-term recovery as well, because you know, and again, we talk about mental health aspects of consistently worrying, am I being followed, where are they, you know, it's absolutely life-sucking for the women, you know. So yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions from the room? I probably have a question around the sexual violence. So you said it's difficult to get the information from survivors. Are you talking about sexual violence that has occurred, or threats of?
Yeah, sexual violence that has occurred.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult for, you know, for women. Like, you know how difficult it would be for me to stand up here and give me a complete rundown from top to bottom of your last sexual encounter with your partner. I mean, I'm sure that people will find that very hard to talk about, you know. So it is extremely hard to extract that information, to be able to form that. You know, there's those co-occurring forms of abuse, but there is significant ways. There's, you know, that there are indicators, and I suppose I can go into a whole deep array of situational awareness and baselines and things like that, but there are indicators for everything that through our training we identify, that you can pick up, that gives you the ability to attack the questioning from a technology perspective as opposed to a sexual violence perspective, and then that would still uncover the same result. But it's yeah, where there's one, guarantee you that the other one's just hanging off the fringes. Yeah.
So making it a safer way to give the information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Perfect. Anyone from online?
It's a question for Grant. Does your service ever utilise technology detection dogs to locate tracking devices? Or would this be too difficult for the dogs given the amount of electronics contained in or on vehicles?
Yes, in short, and look, I'm not a detection dog specialist. My wife was a detection dog handler in the police, so I did pay attention at some stages there through our conversations. But you don't believe me? Look, it's all to do with the dog's ability to identify individual signs of whatever it might be. It's a really good question. I can't categorically give that answer, but it's a really good question. I mean, there's dogs for, you know, we had bomb detection dogs, we had, you know, cadaver dogs, all sorts of different dogs do different things. So, yeah, I'm sure there is a possibility there. It's it comes down to that cost thing, right? It's extremely expensive to train, house, maintain that training for an individual dog. I think the costing's up around $500,000. You know, it's pretty expensive.
Another one for Grant. I would like to know the catchment area for the RETA program. Thanks, Helen.
The RETA program was originally designed for Logan and the Scenic Rim area. But because we've just finished that program, I mean, look, in a perfect, our service can go anywhere and do anything. I suppose that's one of the things that I always said when we started what we were doing. We'll always be agile in what we do. So there's no bureaucracy attached to what we do. So if I need to go to Mount Isa tomorrow, I'll jump on a plane and we'll head over there. But the RETA program Mark II we'll just hold that for a second around where it's going to be. But we are looking at expanding it into a whole array of different areas, and including around the designated high-risk areas where the police are as well, where they've located HRTs, high-risk teams.
I have another question, one for Andrew. What do you suggest is the most time-efficient way to keep up with tech crime trends?
Well, that's a good one. So, I mean, a lot of my research has specifically looked at how cybercrime actors communicate with each other in forums, and I think that's a really vital part of collecting intelligence on what's going to happen. I think often when we think about technology and offending, we think of it as almost a cat and mouse game where we bring in an intervention and then people respond to it. But I think sometimes that actually can really simplify some of the planning that goes on to prepare for some of those disruptions. So in many cases in these forums, people will already be talking about what the next step is after darknet markets, or what will they do if their Telegram channel closed down. So yeah, I think moving away from an idea that everything is a reactive to some sort of intervention that we do, and thinking about how it's more of a prolonged planning thing where, I mean, offenders do the same thing we do with reading the news and being aware of shifts like the social media ban that might be coming up. So, yeah.
Alki, I have a couple of questions in the audience if I can have another turn.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Emily, occupational therapist from Toowoomba Hospital. I have a question for you, Andrew. Bit of a curly one.
Okay.
It's always positives and negatives to everything, and obviously the introduction of the web and internet has been great on some counts. Is there anything positive about the dark web?
So that's actually a really great question, and I would say yes. So I mean, when showing you those markets and telling you that it all sort of depends on one browser, a common response might be, why don't we just delete this browser so people can't access these websites? It's probably a good time. It's a great question. I'll provide a bit more context about how the dark web actually popped up. So the technology itself in rerouting internet traffic through what they call series of onions, so different people essentially using their internet, sort of similar in a way to how VPN works. It was actually something developed by the US military for privacy preserving, and there has been some times, I would argue, over the last few years where there are some serious benefits of privacy preserving technologies. I mean, all of the large social media companies scrape obscene amounts of data on us. The rise of things like ChatGPT is all from our data that they've extracted from us without really giving us an opportunity to provide informed consent. So the dark web is much broader than just these illicit markets. You can use it as well to navigate everyday sort of websites as well, with the purposes of trying to preserve your privacy. And on a broader point as well, there's been some circumstances in cases like whistleblowing activity where you could argue that the dark web serves a purpose in letting us know things that might be happening that potentially citizens should be aware of. But good question.
My question is also for Andrew. So your presentation made it pretty clear that technology is developing quite quickly, and the way that it's used and employed rapidly evolves. So in forensic mental health, for me, that's kind of a scary and confronting thing to feel like we need to stay on top of. And I think probably the only way that we effectively can is through partnerships with either research organisations or organisations that are far more tech savvy than perhaps we are. It's not our area of specialty for the most of us. So I guess I wondered whether you have had any partnerships with industry or government where there's been perhaps a more translational aspect to the research that you're conducting and helping people to work towards that policy development and decision-making matrices that we all need to help guide ethical practice?
Yeah, so not in the context of mental health, but in a project that I touched on at the moment, we're looking at this thing called refund fraud, which is essentially, as I mentioned in the talk, how people manipulate retailer policies. So that project itself is actually funded from a retail loss prevention group that we're working with at the moment. And I suppose our angle in collaborating with them has been that if we want to understand how to address this problem of refund fraud, we need to understand how these communities work, how these markets work. So we're working with them at the moment. There's been a few steps to that project in particular. So a few phases. We've had the first phase where we did this deep dive into these different cybercrime communities to understand how they actually do these refund frauds. And then the next phase to that was we ran a series of workshops with loss prevention teams around Australia. So the loss prevention experts from Bunnings, Kmart, Big W, Myer, all the big retailers in Australia, with the purpose of making that translation between what we do in research and having fun looking at all these weird and wacky communities to actually trying to achieve some outcomes from it. So we are in the process now of working with them to try and develop what is actually in their control. Can they do things on their websites that make it clear to people that certain excuses for refunds won't be permitted? Who are the people that they should be reaching out to? So the fact that refund fraud is not just a retailer problem, it's also something that connects in with banks as well. So.
Thank you. Andrew, but maybe Grant, how well do you think government and policing services particularly have an agility to respond to these things? I mean, technology and government doesn't necessarily always go that well together. There's been some examples in Queensland Health of that.
Look, it's technology's, it's evolving ridiculously fast, and it's probably a little bit unfair to expect frontline. I'll talk about frontline policing from my experience. It's probably a little bit unfair to expect frontline policing. I think we put a lot of pressure on them to be able to deal with these emerging technologies, how to do this, how to do that, when they've got a raft of different services that need to supply, if not for a better word, or to serve the community. I think, I can't talk to the stats on domestic violence that the police respond to at the moment alone, let alone everything else. But what they're really bad at doing, and government in itself, is partnering with private organisations who have the specialist skills to be able to do this. There seems to be, and even me, I do battle with the agencies quite a bit, just around sort of providing information and safety and all this sort of stuff. But I think that's what they can do better, is to identify and partner instead of trying to reinvent a wheel with something that will not work. That's where I think they could do better.
Yeah, I think that's a great response in terms of not expecting that there's too many competing priorities. And I think just to touch on the last point you made, something that I think is really interesting is often what I've found in the space of tech and crime is that there are probably some partners that are the go-tos for government services that might overlook some of the new private industry partners or people in academia. So sometimes it's also just about not being able to consider who else has popped up in the field that can provide solutions like scanning colour. So,
Sorry for making you work all the way around there. This would have been a question for the virtual presenter on ethics, but if I can ask yourself, there's current work happening in Queensland and research in the reverse of machine learning, so it's machine unlearning. So when you go on the internet, you get a whole history of everybody. You can pick it up. This will effectively prevent that from happening. Can you see any problems where that may be manipulated by?
So are you talking in situations where the new data that these AI models are being trained on is just based on AI data? Is that sort of what you're hinting at? Yeah. Well, if anyone's keen to jump down a rabbit hole, you can look up what's called the dead internet theory, which suggests that about like 80 or 90% of internet traffic is all from bots and artificial intelligence. So next time you're scrolling through Facebook comments, you can think about why the comments say that. I think it's definitely a concern, as these something I was reading just this morning suggested that some of these AI models like ChatGPT aren't actually scaling as they expected them to with the investments that they've had in computational resources or from capital funders. So I think that's definitely a point. Maybe we've reached the point where ChatGPT is about as smart as what it can be because the next data that we're training it on simply isn't there. The other problem that has popped up too is that the spaces where these models are trying to collect some of these data, say I'll stick with ChatGPT as the bigger example. Historically, it's trained a lot of its stuff on things like Reddit forum comments, and Reddit have recognized that, well, hang on a second, you're taking all of our user data. That's our data that to play around with and manipulate people with. So maybe that's how David would answer that question. But I think just on the point of AI more generally, it's been really interesting over the last few months to see some of the research that's coming out about how effective AI really is day to day for people's jobs. An article was published in the criminology field recently that suggested that in most cases, police officers found that actually AI just created more work for them, and that the time it would take to do things like scrub reports of user details to ensure their privacy and confidentiality, upload it into something like ChatGPT, rework it all. They probably just could have written the report themselves. So I don't know if that answers your question.
And we've got a question from online. I just want to quickly point out that the title for today was assisted by ChatGPT. So it gave us a list of 10 and we kind of worked from the 10.
Love it.
A question for Andrew again. Thank you for the great presentation. Just one question. There are so many government organisations using management tools and technologies online. We have been told that the system we are currently using is very old, efficient and non-hackable. Can that be true in the era of cybercrime? Something to be non-hackable at all?
This is where we're starting to get into the realm of cybersecurity and a little bit beyond my expertise, but I think generally there's differences between whether something is, say, like a closed system or not. That's usually what it might come down to. If the system is something that, say, just Queensland Health have, that presents entirely different risks to using something like a cloud-based service that 20 other health organisations from all around the world use. So.
And no other questions from online and none from inside. So we are currently sitting at 3 minutes to 11 and we have morning tea now until 11:30. So I'm hoping that catering has arrived and is set up, and Deb looks outside and she's shaking her head, which is great.
Can I ask a question of Grant?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll stall for the morning tea. Throughout your talk, I was wondering, have you seen any instances where, beyond the use of AirTags and tracking devices on cars, have you seen anything with parenting apps or family apps where everyone signs up to an app which constantly shares their location? Is there the use of that as well?
Yeah, all the time. And I'll say that in the realm of sort of DV offending, it's not a 007 type space, right? We're not. It is very basic and rudimentary uses of Apple IDs and, you know, things like sharing Google locations and just not having the awareness that this has occurred. But it's always important to point out that the sharing and the actual, I'll call it hacking for for the sake of hacking, but knowing someone's password. This doesn't happen at, just at the time of a separation. This has been going on at the start, where everything's fine. Here, have my phone, do all that sort of stuff. You can, buy something online for me. And this is where you start to see these things occur. And then it's just sort of, as time goes on, it catches up. So it's just a lack of education around safe internet use and understanding what Google does and their capabilities outside of the normal operating system of a phone. It's really important, yeah. But yeah, your Live 360s, your family sharing apps and all that sort of stuff, they're a dime a dozen. And they're usually the front for something else. So, just because there's one thing that's located, we don't stop and go, great, this is what's going on. It's usually, it's the old come along type routine. I'll put something here so you find it, so you're not going to pay attention on what's going on over on the other side. So it's, and again, that all comes back down to the MO or the capability of the offender or what they're doing as well. So that's where he pays to be curious about them.
And I think it's knowledge of, so I use Life 360 to track the kids, but then realised they could track me. Yeah, but didn't realise until they said, oh, so where were you today? And I'm like, oh, yeah, I was at work. And they're going, you took a day off today, didn't you? I'm like, oh, how did you know? Yeah,
it does. That look, I do. I share it with my kids as well because, I got sick of my son ringing me and asking me what time I was going to be home and where I was. And then the double-edged sword of that is, Dad, can you drop in and pick this up? No, I can't. He goes, I know where you are.
I think you can.
Yeah, you can drop in and pick.
Yeah.
Damn it. All right. Yeah, you got me. So, but even that, right, it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget that you're actually sharing everything like locations because, there are some apps that pop up and say you're sharing a location. Do you still want to continue it? But your internal operating system type sharing doesn't remind you. So easy to forget.
All right. Thank you very much.